My parents announced my sister was moving into my place. I let them ramble. They had no clue I'd secretly moved out months ago. This is a wild, so hit that subscribe button to never miss out on uploads. And let's get into this story. My name is Ryan, and I'm 29 years old. If you ask my parents, they'd probably describe me as the difficult one in the family. Not because I was reckless or lazy, quite the opposite, actually. I always worked hard, paid for everything on my own, and kept my life on track. But to them, that just meant I was the go-to fixer, the one they leaned on whenever something went sideways. And by something, I mean my older sister, Claire. Claire is 32 now, but you'd never guess that based on how she handles herself. She's never kept a stable job for longer than a few months. There was always some excuse. She couldn't pay rent, couldn't keep work, and none of it was ever her fault. Somehow, she always managed to make our parents believe she was just unlucky. Her boss was a jerk, her roommates were crazy, or the economy was just awful. Meanwhile, she kept rotating between crashing at our parents' house or at some poor friend's place who hadn't learned better yet. I realized early on that if I wanted peace, I had to put some distance between myself and her chaos. But that was easier said than done, since my parents had a habit of dragging me into her mess. Usually with a guilt trip. Family helps family, and I should be grateful for my success. That's why I worked so hard to draw lines and set firm boundaries, to make it crystal clear that I wasn't her backup plan. But as I would soon learn, my parents never respected those lines. They just waited for the right moment to cross them. It all blew up at a family dinner. I probably should have seen it coming the second I walked into my parents' house. My mom was being unusually cheerful, my dad quiet, and Claire wasn't even making eye contact. Something was off, but I had no idea how far it was about to go. Dinner started out normal, small talk, and my mom's usual passive-aggressive jabs about how I never visit anymore. I just nodded and focused on eating, hoping to survive the evening without incident. But just as I started thinking I might actually escape without drama, my mom set her fork down, clasped her hands, and hit me with it. "So, Ryan," she began, using that sugary voice she always used when she had bad news, "Claire's going to move in with you for a bit." I almost choked on my food. The room went dead silent, like they were all waiting for me to nod and accept it. But I didn't respond, not yet. I just looked at them, waiting for the rest of the justification. Because with them, there was always more. And sure enough, my mom kept going. "She's been going through a tough time lately, and you've got that nice apartment all to yourself," she explained like it was the most reasonable thing in the world. "It just makes sense. You can help her get back on her feet, and she won't be a burden on us. A burden on them. Because heaven forbid they ever hold her accountable." That was clearly my responsibility, but I still stayed silent. I just sat there, listening, watching the whole thing unfold like a car crash in slow motion. Then my dad chimed in, trying to add his 2 cents. "It's not like you can't afford it," he said. "She just needs somewhere stable for now." That's when Claire finally joined in. "It'll just be for a few months," she said, in a tone that sounded way too rehearsed. "And I can help out around the place, too." That was a joke, and everyone at the table knew it. Claire never helped out with anything, and cleaning up after herself was a foreign concept. Still, I didn't react. I gave a small nod, like I was considering it. But really, I was waiting for them to finish their little pitch. Waiting for them to really commit to the idea. Waiting for them to make the fatal mistake of assuming I was going to play along. I let the silence linger, just long enough to make things uncomfortable. I could feel their eyes on me, expecting some sort of outburst. But I didn't give them anger. I just took a breath, set my fork down, and said, "Okay." For a second, no one said anything. My mom blinked in surprise, like she hadn't expected me to agree. My dad let out a breath, clearly relieved. "And Claire?" She smiled like she'd just won a prize. "Really?" my mom asked, squinting at me. "You're okay with it?" I shrugged. "If it helps Claire, I don't see why not." That was all it took. My parents lit up. My mom launched into a whole speech about how proud she was, how great I was for stepping up. My dad nodded like I'd just solved world hunger. Claire leaned back in her seat, looking smug. You could practically see her planning which room she'd take. She probably thought I'd just rolled over and let her win. And why wouldn't she? She'd pulled this off before. When we were younger, she'd steal my things and play dumb when I got upset. In college, she borrowed my laptop and conveniently never gave it back. When she couldn't pay rent at her first apartment, she had my parents talk me into covering it just this once. Except it was never just once. Claire didn't just act entitled. She was an expert at playing the victim. She twisted the narrative, so I always looked like the uptight, selfish sibling if I said no. But this time, she didn't know what was coming. "So, when's she moving in?" I asked, casually taking another bite of my food. My mom looked thrilled. "We were thinking this weekend. That way she can settle in before she starts job hunting again." "This weekend's perfect. Claire added, stretching like she had just won the lottery. I don't have much, just clothes and a few boxes. Shouldn't take long. I nodded. Great. Just tell me what time, and I'll be there. That part wasn't a lie. I was definitely going to be there. Not at the apartment, though. I'd be somewhere far better, watching it all unfold. Because Claire, my parents, and a carload of her things were about to arrive at my old apartment. The one I hadn't lived in for over a month. The one I'd sold. The one with a brand new tenant who had no idea what kind of circus was about to arrive. And I wasn't going to warn them, not yet. I was going to let the whole thing play out. On the other end of the call, my mom's voice carried that shaken edge, like she'd just been blindsided. But you said everything was fine where you were living, she stammered, confused. I mean, it was, I answered smoothly, adding just enough nonchalance to sound relaxed. But things change sometimes. I hadn't planned to reveal the truth this way, but the offer I got for the apartment had been too good to pass up. There was a heavy pause on the line, broken only by the faint sound of Claire muttering angrily in the background. My dad was the next to speak, though his voice now wavered with frustration. Why didn't you tell us, Ryan? He snapped. You could have at least given us a heads up. Now we're stuck in this mess. And Claire. I didn't even let him finish. Look, Dad, I said, keeping my voice even. You're acting like I betrayed you or something. I made a personal decision. I'm an adult. I don't need to run every life choice by the family first. Before he could argue, my mom jumped in. So what are we supposed to do now? Are you going to help us out, or should we just haul everything back home? I let the silence linger for a moment, drawing it out just enough before answering. Well, I said slowly, dragging out the word. That's really up to you. Maybe there's a couch somewhere Claire can crash on. Another long, painful pause. I could practically feel the tension bleeding through the line. Then Mom's voice came again, soft, strained, and laced with disbelief. This isn't fair, Ryan. You're seriously just leaving us to deal with this? I leaned back in my chair, cool as ever. Sorry, I replied. Maybe I should have said something sooner. But, you know, life doesn't always go according to plan. I can't always be the one patching things up. Claire's voice suddenly cut through the line, louder now, desperate and annoyed. What's happening, Ryan? What is all this? I grinned. I don't know, Claire. Maybe you should have had a plan that didn't depend on other people cleaning up your messes. I heard her groan something under her breath, and it just made my grin widen. But I wasn't quite finished yet. Anyway, I said casually, I've got stuff to do. Best of luck with everything, though. Really hope it works out. And I ended the call. My fingers still tingled from the tension I'd just walked away from. What I didn't realize at the time was this. This was only the beginning. The rest of that afternoon was strangely satisfying, a weird blend of calm and anticipation. I let the storm I'd stirred up simmer without lifting a finger. I knew how my parents worked. First confusion, then frustration, but soon enough, the real fireworks would start. And Claire? She'd do what she always did, play the victim. But this time, I wasn't giving her an audience. By the time I got home, the sky had faded into that perfect orange hue that only late afternoons bring. I locked the door behind me, kicked off my shoes, and dropped into my couch like it was a throne. I didn't feel an ounce of guilt. Not even close. This was justice. Clean, simple, satisfying. They had used me, lied to me, and treated me like their emergency backup plan. Now it was their turn to deal with the fallout. About an hour later, a knock came at the door. My entire body tensed. I peeked through the peephole, and there they were. My parents, Claire, and all of her belongings. The car was parked right outside, trunk wide open, stacked with boxes and suitcases like something out of a low-budget sitcom. I just stood there for a second, watching them, barely believing they had actually come here. And the best part? They had no clue this was where I really lived now. They thought they were coming to the new place to drop Claire off like royalty. Instead, they were about to meet the real me. I opened the door slowly, making sure I looked calm and unbothered. Ryan, my mom said, her voice uncertain and almost pleading. We tried calling, but you didn't answer. We figured out where you live now. I raised an eyebrow. Oh, did you? That must have taken some effort. That's not important. My dad cut in, trying to sound firm. We need to talk. You need to fix this. He gestured toward Claire, and her stuff like that explained everything. You told her she could move in here, and now we've brought all her things. There's nowhere else to go. I leaned casually on the doorframe, arms crossed. Yeah, see? That's where the confusion is. I never said she could move in here. Dad's eyes widened, his patience clearly thinning. Ryan, don't do this. Don't make things harder than they need to be. We came all this way. You can't just turn us away like this. What kind of brother are you? Claire was standing just behind them, arms crossed, glaring at me like I'd just committed a felony. You're serious? She snapped. You said I could stay, and now you're acting like we don't even exist? I tilted my head, fighting back a grin. Wait, you thought you could just walk into my home like it was a hotel? That's interesting. And that's when it hit them. They realized what was really going on. This was my home, not the apartment they thought I had sold. And I wasn't giving them anything. Not a key, not a couch, not a minute of my time. Claire's face turned crimson. Are you seriously going to do this to me, Ryan? After everything, I let the silence speak for itself for a few seconds. I watched their expressions shift, confusion, to anger, to embarrassment. They knew. They had walked into a trap. Look, I said, stepping closer. Let me be crystal clear. This is my place. Mine. I didn't sell anything. I didn't offer anything. I'm not giving you anything. My parents just stared at me. My mom looked like she wanted to argue, but something stopped her. The fact that I, Ryan, the dependable one, was standing up to them? That was too much for her to process. You lied, my dad finally growled. You lied about everything. You let this happen. I shrugged. I didn't lie. You just didn't bother asking the right questions. Claire stepped forward, hands on her hips, eyes blazing. You're not even a real brother. We're family, Ryan. And you're just going to leave me out here like trash. I looked her dead in the eye. I'm not throwing you out, Claire. I'm just not letting you in. The silence after that was delicious. My dad started pacing. My mom looked lost. And I was just getting started. My mother looked like she was seconds away from completely unraveling. Her face flushed, hands trembling with rage. Honestly, it was almost laughably easy. Then Lauren snapped. If you're not going to let me inside, then we'll just make you. My stomach tightened as she stepped toward the door. For a second, I actually thought she might try to barge in. That was the moment I decided I'd had more than enough. I took a breath, calm and clear, pulled out my phone, and didn't say a word before dialing. Hello, I said, keeping my tone neutral. I'd like to report a trespassing situation. They all froze. My parents and Lauren stopped cold, their expressions going pale as it dawned on them what I was doing. Without breaking eye contact, I explained everything to the operator. I've asked my relatives to leave, I said smoothly. They're refusing. They showed up trying to force their way into my home, and I don't feel safe. I glanced at Lauren. Her face twisted into something between rage and disbelief. My mom was speechless. My dad looked like he was scrambling to salvage the situation. This is going to backfire on you, Lauren hissed, venom in her voice. I smiled slightly, voice steady. We'll find out soon enough, Lauren. Once I ended the call, the weight of the moment hit me. I'd made the choice. Now it was their turn to deal with the fallout. A siren wailed somewhere down the street. That was the only warning they got. They stood still as statues, watching me like I might suddenly change my mind. But I didn't move. I was done with the guilt, the manipulation, the endless demands. The officer who stepped out of the cruiser was a tall woman with short auburn hair and a serious expression that meant business. She looked at me first, then at my parents and Lauren, who were fidgeting awkwardly at the edge of my doorway like teenagers caught skipping class. Good evening, she said in a firm but respectful tone. I understand there's an issue here. I nodded, calm but direct. Yes, officer. These people showed up without my permission, expecting to move into my apartment. I've asked them multiple times to leave. I'm concerned they'll try to enter by force. She turned toward them. Is this true? She asked, still polite, but the edge in her voice was clear. They hesitated. You could tell they didn't want to admit they were in the wrong, but it was too late to save face. Lauren jumped in first, arms crossed, voice tense. He's lying. He invited me here. We came because he said I could move in. And now he's kicking me out after everything I've done for him. The officer didn't flinch. Ma'am, she said coolly. If Mr. Chris has told you this is his residence and he's asked you to leave, then you are trespassing. You cannot show up uninvited and expect to be let in. My parents looked like they were trying to slide out of the spotlight, shifting uncomfortably. Look, officer, my dad tried, raising his hands. We didn't mean to cause any trouble. We just thought Chris wouldn't mind. We've helped him before, he owes us. The officer didn't blink. I understand that you had an expectation, sir, but that doesn't give you the right to cross someone's boundaries or enter their home without consent. I need you all to leave the premises now. The tension was unbearable. My parents exchanged tight glances. I could almost feel their anger rising, but they were stuck. The officer turned to Lauren. You can walk away now, or we'll have to remove you. Lauren growled under her breath, seething. You could see her calculating whether she could talk her way out of this. But the officer stepped forward again, her tone final. Ma'am, this is your last warning. If you stay, you will be arrested for trespassing. That shut her down. Her posture sagged, and she reluctantly stepped back, giving me a look like I'd stabbed her in the back. My parents trailed behind, my mom's face a mixture of rage and humiliation. The officer escorted them off the property, and I stood there in the doorway, unmoving, watching them go. It wasn't satisfying exactly, just freeing. Years of pressure, guilt, and obligation melted off my shoulders. The nightmare was over. Before she left, the officer glanced at me. "If anything like this happens again, don't hesitate to call." I gave a small nod. "Thanks, officer." She left, making sure the door was locked behind her. And then, for the first time in a long time, my life felt like it was mine. I didn't process it all at once. Honestly, I hadn't realized how heavy they'd been until they were gone. It wasn't just about this one day. It was years of being expected to always step up, to carry their mess, to solve their problems. I had never truly had my own space before. Now I did. The following morning, I sorted through the fallout. I knew there'd be a mess, but I wasn't rushing to fix anything. For once, I didn't feel like it was my job. My phone was lit up with missed calls, dozens of voicemails from my parents, all rage-filled. Lauren's texts were even worse. Insults, guilt trips, accusations. She called me heartless, selfish, even cruel. I blocked all of them. It's been 2 weeks now, and life has finally calmed down. I've had time to think, to breathe, to focus on me. I've gotten back into my work, reconnected with friends, and found peace again. No more looking over my shoulder, waiting for the next crisis to land at my feet. But I'll admit, I'm wondering, did I take it too far? Was I too cold? I'm not asking for sympathy. I'm just genuinely curious. What would you have done in my place? Did I handle it the right way? Or could there have been another path?